Once again, thank you for inviting me. And today I'm going to share with you about the varieties of English as a resource in multicultural and multilingual communication. So I would be sharing with you, some of the studies that I conducted related to multicultural and multilingual communication. So I looked at the varieties of English as a resource here. Because quite a number of studies have been conducted that focus more into the problems of the use of the varieties of English, and others are actually talking about miscommunication in the use of different varieties of English, and that those were some of the studies that I conducted also before, and I published. I even worked before with one Russian professor. She's a social linguist. Her name is Svetlana. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she did quite a number of paper on miscommunication, and we did I think we did three papers so that we co-authored before, and we published, and we focus more into miscommunication and the use of the different varieties of English. However, later on, I realized that the varieties of English could also be used as a resource instead of looking at that as a source of miscommunication. But I realized later that it can be a source for understanding, you know, um, in um, interaction among different speakers of different Englishes. To start with my presentation, I'd like to look at the three groups of different users or different speakers of English. The usual question that we have is that who speaks English today? And how many speakers of English today? And English is becoming like a globalized kind of language. And with the emergence of the varieties of English, with the emergence of world Englishes, and now with the emergence of global Englishes, so we've seen that there are a number of speakers of different Englishes nowadays. However, this group of speakers can still be classified into three, although there are so many classifications of many different speakers of English, but the common groups that we normally do are the three major ones: the ENL, or the English as native language speakers. These are the people who speak English as their mother tongue or as their first language, and usually characterized from people who lived in countries like the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and these are what we call the English speaking countries. And then we have the other group of users of English. We call them as users of English as a second language, or what we call the ESL speakers. And usually these are the speakers of English where English in their countries is used as as an official language, or it has like official functions. And the third group of speakers of English are what we call the speakers of English as a foreign language, or what we call the EFL. So these are the countries where English is considered as foreign and no official function in those countries. Although there are a lot of debates, that the way it is categorized geographically, and in fact, Kutcher's model and Kutcher's classification of the different speakers of Englishes are widely debated by many scholars, because geography itself may not tell whether all people in that country are all ENL speakers, or all ESL speakers, or all EFL speakers. I'll just take the US, for example. Here in the US, people would perceive that, if you're an American, or if you stay in the US, then automatically would say most people, or a majority, or almost all people, are native speakers of English. But it doesn't really show that way, because there are a lot of people here who are not native speakers of English. They speak, other languages. They might be native speakers of Spanish. Then English becomes the second language, and or they might be native speakers of other ethnic languages. Then English becomes the second language. And for example, in Singapore, Singapore is considered as an ESL country where people are considered to be second language speakers of English, but there are also a lot of people there who speak English as their native language or as their mother tongue. So geographically, it's very contentious this time to really categorize people, whether they're ENL or ESL, or perhaps maybe we can say EFL. So, but then these are the common categories. Generally, if you're going to categorize the users, we can categorize them into three as ENL, ESL, or EFL. So, in this paper that I am presenting, I'm going to look at the three different Englishes and three different speakers of English, from Southeast Asia, then to the Middle East, like speakers of English in the Philippines, speakers of English in Malaysia, and speakers of English in Oman. So in the Philippines and Malaysia, English is considered as a second language, and English in Oman is considered as a foreign language. I'm not sure in Kazakhstan whether English is used as a second or as a foreign language. So
No, it is used as a foreign language because
it's a foreign language.
mm,
Thank you for letting me know. I would just want to give you a background about the Englishes in these three different countries, and that is to provide an overview, how these different Englishes are used when people from the Philippines or when people from Malaysia and when people from Oman interact. So English in the Philippines is one of the two official languages of the country. So English is considered as an official language, and Filipino is considered as the national language. So there are two official languages with one national language, which is Filipino. So English is widely spoken, especially in urbanized areas, especially in the capital and other big cities of the Philippines, and widely used as the medium of instruction in from primary to secondary and tertiary education. So English plays a very important role in the government as well as in business. Um, Aside from that, Filipinos have they speak different languages. So like we have like 170 languages, different languages. So we could say that Filipinos are multilingual speakers. So they speak like a minimum of two languages or more. And of those languages, English is commonly spoken by the majority of the speakers. So in Malaysia, it's almost similar demographics with the Philippines, because English in Malaysia is spoken as a second language, and it is also used as medium of instruction, especially in English speaking schools, and commonly used as the medium of instructions in some colleges and universities. So there were a lot of uh, like changes in the language policy in Malaysia, especially in the use of English as the medium of instruction, because Malaysia under the was under the British colony, and then later on when they gained independence, that's where they introduced Bahasa Malaysia as the um, national language. Then Mahathir introduced Bahasa Malaysia as the medium of instruction for so many years. That's to enhance their identity formation. But later on in 2003, there was a shift of changing the medium of instruction from Malay to English, and then especially in science and mathematics, and then later on in the latter part of the 2009 or 2010, I there was a shift of moving back, reverting the medium of instruction, especially in science and mathematics, to Bahasa Malaysia. And I think right now there is also another move of reverting back to English. So it's quite a bit complex and complicated when it comes to the language policy. So, Bahasa Malaysia is the national language in Malaysia and widely used for administrative and educational purpose. And English is also widely spoken. And they have that nativized variety of English that shares almost similar linguistic features with the Singaporean English. And Malaysian English is quite distinct as compared to the other Englishes in Southeast Asia because of some common features, that it has, like the simplification and reduction of um, the non-native variety, and there is also an influence of the local languages, in their um, Malaysian variety of English. Then let's move to Oman. Oman is one of the countries in the Middle East, and English in Oman is considered as a foreign language. So if English is considered as a foreign language in Kazakhstan, the same thing in Oman. And English is introduced as a subject in schools, colleges, and universities. You notice that it is a foreign language, but this is taught, starting from the primary school, then to secondary school, and to the tertiary education, but they are just taken as a subject. It has no like official functions outside the schools. So when you go to the government offices, so Arabic is spoken. And in business, they frequently use also Arabic, except with international businesses where English is considered to be important. So English is used as a medium of instruction in private and public higher education throughout the country. And the use of English in Oman was institutionalized in some businesses, in some media, and in some educational institutions. So, looking at the different varieties of English, then we can look at Katsru's three-circled model of English as the most widely referred model of the varieties of English that includes the inner circle, the outer circle, and the expanding circle. The inner circle that refers to the native speakers of English. The outer circle, these are the speakers of English second language, and expanding circle that refers to the speakers of English who are classified as the foreign language learners or speakers of English. So I'd like to look at, the different areas before moving on to the direction of this research and the result of this research that I did. So I would just want to emphasize how language, English language in particular, how important it is and how it is uh, like linked to culture and how it is linked to communication. We should always remember that language is not only a means for us to present our own notion of who we are, especially when we speak. Okay, but it is also a way for others to project onto us their own supposition of the way we must be. That's according to Spolsky, 1999. And we use language in order for us to socialize, in order for us to interact, in order for us to communicate. And language is always associated with culture. That's why language and culture, they always go together. So when we say culture, it is that refers to a group of people who create and share certain meanings based on experience, beliefs, values, worldviews, and mental patterns. So culture, it's a shared experience of a group of people. It is a shared values. It is a shared beliefs and shared worldviews and even shared mental patterns. The way people, understand, and language plays a very important role in a culture. And in fact, if you're going to look at here in the circle that I highlight here, so culture is in the middle. But if you're going to look at language, it's just part of it. But then if you're going to think deeper and understand deeper that language is not just, it's not just part of it, but language is actually part of the beliefs, part of the attitudes, part of the drama or music or art, food, faith, behavior, rituals, customs. Because in all of these aspects, language is actually used. Like beliefs is our beliefs are communicated through the use of the language. Our attitudes are reflected through the use of the language. Art, drama, and music are expressed through the use of the language. Food is also identified through the use of the language. That's why we name foods in different languages, and you could not identify the food without the language itself. When we talk about faith and religion, so it is also um, introduced, or it is practiced, with the use of the language. And when you read the uh, holy book, or when you profess your faith, when you profess your religion, then you use the language. The way your behavior is manifested, it can be manifested also through the use of the language. The way you perform your rituals, you could not just perform the rituals without the language. And even your customs are being performed with the use of the language. So actually, if you're going to look at here, language is actually embedded, in this different aspects. So we see how important language and how it is linked, with the culture. So language is closely related to culture, and they could never be separated. And both languages, both language and culture, they go together when people start communicating. So both culture and communication could never be separated as well. Either a verbal or nonverbal forms of communication, both occurs within the cultural framework. And to develop the communicative competence, speakers should be conscious of others' culture, others' values, others' practices, and others' languages. And I think in studying multilingualism and multilingualism in particular, or bilingualism, then it is very important and essential for us to understand about language. We need to understand about culture, and we need to understand about communication. Otherwise, if you don't have the basic knowledge of those, then it would be very difficult for you to explain, and it would be very difficult for you to understand the notion of multilingualism. So that's why the area of multilingualism or bilingualism is really huge. It's quite big, because there are a lot of other aspects that you need to consider that may include language, culture, and communication. And that's very important, because in a multilingual society, we always aim for successful communication despite the diversity in culture, despite the diversity in languages. Then our main objective is always to have a success in communication, or success when interacting with people of different linguistic and cultural backgrounds. And successful communication happens only because of the speaker's intercultural communicative competence. So, in a multilingual context, and for a speaker or for a user of a particular language, when that person will interact with other people, he could or she could be successful in any forms of interaction if that person develops that intercultural communicative competence. And there are several components of intercultural competence that we need to understand. That includes our cultural awareness, that includes our cultural knowledge, that includes our skills, our attitudes, and all of them are, interrelated. And one will not contribute to communicative competence without the other. So they one will not exist without the other. So when we say cultural awareness, so that's one important factor for you to develop intercultural communicative competence in a multilingual context. So cultural awareness that refers to your ability to critically evaluate perspectives, practices, and products in one's own and other cultures and countries by making learners' values more explicit. So that's why in a multilingual society, people living there should be able to have that cultural awareness. And the reason why multilingualism exists because of people's differences in languages and people's differences in culture. And so therefore, cultural awareness is very essential. Another thing is cultural knowledge, which is another essential point that you need to consider in intercultural communicative competence, which means that speakers should know about some cultural characteristics, history, values, beliefs, and behaviors of another ethnic or cultural group. In a multilingual society, it is very important for people who speak different languages to know the cultural characteristics, history, values, beliefs, and behaviors of other ethnic groups. That is for you to achieve communicative competence. Another thing that every speaker should have should be the skill. When we talk about the skill in the perspective of intercultural communicative competence in a multilingual context, would be the ability of the speaker to see how misunderstandings can arise and how they might be able to resolve them. So you need to develop that skills, but skills can be developed if you are culturally aware, if you have that cultural knowledge as well. Then another thing would be the attitude. So the attitude involves the speaker's curiosity and openness, readiness to suspend disbeliefs about other cultures. So even for attitudes in a multilingual context, multilingual people should develop that openness and readiness to accept other people's culture. So I came up with this idea that in order for us to achieve successful communication, then we need to develop this language awareness, cultural awareness. We have cultural knowledge, the skills and attitude. So I'm looking at the speakers of one variety of English and the other one variety of English. Then each speaker should have this five components of intercultural communicative competence, then eventually successful communication will be achieved. So in this kind of paper that I'll be presenting today, would like to examine the different varieties of English that are used in order to succeed in multicultural and multilingual communication. So what I did in this study, I asked three different groups of speakers of Englishes to participate. So there were Filipinos, people from the Philippines, Malaysians, people from Malaysia, and we have the Omanis. These were the people from Oman. So there were 20 conversations recorded in various contexts. Some were recorded in shops, offices, and in three campuses in Oman, like vocational training center, one college, and one university somewhere in Borivali. Then the data from the Malaysian context were taken from my previous study in Malaysia in 2014, where we studied about miscommunication in Malaysian Filipino interaction. It's on the intercultural discourse in English that we published way back in 2014. So the common features that in this research we'll look at the different features and particularly the common features of the varieties of English in these three different countries like the Philippine English. In the Philippine English, it's very distinct on its own where Philippine English follows the North American English, but they develop their own variety of English. And Philippine English is distinct in a way that it develops its own vocabulary, and there's already a dictionary of Philippine English this time. It has also its own way of pronouncing some of the English words, and even the structure of English are could totally be different from the American English. Malaysian English, in a way, is also some a distinct kind of English because it is influenced by the different cultures in Malaysia, like the Malays, the Chinese, and the Indians. So, in a way, it also contributed in developing new lexical items, and the structure is also simplified, and the phonological aspect it is pronounced. There are different ways of pronouncing some of the Malaysian English, and we did a study before on the phonology of the Malaysian English as compared to the British English because Malaysian English is heavily much influenced by the British. And we've seen that there are a lot of differences with the Malaysian English phonology as compared to the British English phonology. Oman is another case because Oman is a country where Arabic is widely spoken and English is considered to be a foreign language to them. So, but they have their own Omani variety of English that follows more of the Arabic kind of syntactic structure, and they also develop their own lexis and usually taken from the Arabic language. So Oman English is not yet as developed as compared to Philippine and Malaysian Englishes. Philippine English and Malaysian English are already um, fully studied, and there are quite a number of research on this. And in looking at the varieties of English and intercultural communication, as I mentioned earlier, so I looked at the language awareness, cultural awareness, and cultural knowledge of the skills and the attitude of the speakers. So for example, here, it shows that language awareness was very evident, in the interaction between the Filipinos and the Malaysians. So this one would allow the speaker to reflect on the language and develop sensitivity to others. One example that I have here is the interaction between a Filipino and a Malaysian about the toilet, because the word toilet has different English terminologies. Sorry. For example, here there's a Filipino asking, where's the comfort room here? So in the Philippines, toilet is known as comfort room. Here in the US, we call it as the restroom. And in other countries, they call that one differently. And the Malaysian replied, don't know. And I presume that the Malaysian did not understand what comfort room is. Then the Filipino said, I mean toilet. Then the Malaysian, so in the third um, line, we can say that the Filipino understood that the Malaysian speaker did not understand what comfort room is, and being aware of the language of uh, the language that Filipino is using, and that person starts to think right away that perhaps comfort room is not understood by the other speaker, so the use of the toilet, is used. And then the Malaysians said they're pointing to the toilet. Malaysians are good in pointing, in giving directions. And the Filipinos say thank you. So if you're going to look at here in this interaction, there is what we call a language awareness, that the Filipino speaker is aware that the Malaysian is not familiar with the word comfort room, and so therefore the use of the word toilet, is used. And then you could see that towards the end of the interaction, both speaker, you know, um, understand uh, with the message. So the second example, I'm just giving one example in each because I don't want to make this talk very long so we can have more time to discuss, is what we call the cultural awareness. So that means being aware of one's own culture and the culture of others. So this is also, the example here is also taken from Malaysia, where a Filipino met the Malaysian friend and walking near the shopping mall, and we call that one KLCC, one of the famous shopping mall in Malaysia. And the Malaysian said, "Where you go?" So this kind of question is very common in Malaysia, asking like, "Where are you going?" or "Where will you go?" But you notice that there is a pattern of simplification plus the use of which is like a particle that's commonly used in Malaysia when asking question. Then the Filipino responded, hmm. So here it's just like the Filipino is trying to think, or is thinking, what is he really asking? Is he asking, where am I going? Or where did you go? Or where will you go? Because the question is, where you go? So it's quite a bit difficult to really figure out. Then later in the third line, the Malaysian is actually clarifying. So trying to figure out that the the phrase or the question "where you go," it's just like not understood by the other speaker. Then the Malaysian speaker is giving a hint. Shopping. Then the Filipino said, I see now. I'll meet my friend." So you could see also here that the Malaysian is able to uh, become more aware of his own culture, the way he actually used the question. So in the end, both of them understood each other. Then the other one is the cultural knowledge, having the knowledge of cultural practices and product of one's own and in one's interlocutor's culture. So this one has something to do with the Filipino and the Omani encounters who are having conversation while taking a meal. As part of the Omani culture, they keep on putting more food when the visitor's plate is empty. So it's just like when you're eating with them, and once they notice that your plate is already empty, they automatically put something. And I myself realized that if I'm already full, I will not eat all my food, but I have to remain some there. Otherwise, they would keep on putting some food to it. So Nomani said, "Take more of this." Then the Filipino replied, "No, this is too much." Then the Omani said, "Yeah, take it, I swear." So there's already the use of the word "I swear" that is commonly understood, among people, that when they say "I swear," that means that um, they really mean it, that you really have to. Otherwise, if you don't, that would be a form of disrespect, to the host. Then the Filipino said, okay, the Filipino understood after that, after hearing the word "I swear," the Filipino said, okay, but this is too much. And the man said, take it. Then the Filipino took it and said, thank you. So in the end, you could see that the two of them were actually they're able to resolve that issue of food. So it has something to do with knowing the cultural knowledge. Otherwise, if you refuse, such kind of refusal is considered to be unacceptable in um, Omani culture. The other one is the encounter between a Filipino and a Malaysian, wherein a Filipino customer and a Malaysian waiter in a restaurant. The Filipino said, "I want that one," pointing the food. So trying to adapt the Malaysian culture. Then the Malaysian responded, "Okay, wait la." La is a common particle that's used in Malaysian English. Then the Filipino replied, "Okay." Then the Malaysian said, "Finish, ah." Then the Filipino said, "No, I did not receive anything." So you notice here that the word finish here is actually misunderstood by the Filipino that the food was already served. That's why the Filipino responded, "I did not receive anything." That means that it wasn't served yet. Then the Malaysian insisted, "Finish already." Then with code switching into Bahasa Malaysia, which means habis, which means finish. Then the Filipino tried to figure out, based on the context, what finish is all about. And so the Filipino is trying to clarify it. They said, "You mean it's not available?" Then the Malaysian um, waiter responded, "Same la." So said, it's the same. So, it towards the end, they're able to understand each other. But skill is very important here, especially in clarifying meaning and, clarifying what is ambiguous in the conversation. That's why there's a question that is asked here. You mean it's not available? That's one way of clarifying meaning. So the same thing that we have in example 4, but I won't elaborate that because it's almost the same example with what I mentioned earlier. Then we have the attitude. So it is the ability to adjust the speaker's attitude when communicating. So this is an encounter between an Omani student and and teacher. But the teacher is not Omani, and the student said to the teacher, "Teacher, why my mark only 4?" Then the teacher replied, "Let me check your paper again." Then the student said, "Why, teacher? Help, help. My grade's no good." So this is the use of this structure is very common in Oman, in Omani English, I would say. Then the teacher said, "I cannot just change your mark. Just try your best in the next test." Then the student insisted, "No, teacher, change." So it also shows how the Omani kind of English is used. It's just like a shortcut kind of English, and very common in language acquisition for those learners who have just started learning English. They are they short they make shortcuts. Then the teacher said, "What? You want me to change the mark? No, it's not possible." Then the student again reiterated the word, "Why no?" instead of saying not. And this one is also very visible in language acquisition when the person who acquires a language doesn't have yet that proficiency. No is very common to them for negative statement. They don't use the word not or they don't use the word this, but they frequently use the word no. And the student replied, "Why no? Hell." Then the teacher replied, "Okay, leave your exam paper and I will let you know later." Then the student again reiterated, "Thank you, teacher. Help." Then the teacher replied, "I will see." So if you're going to look at towards the end, the teacher fully understand what the word help is all about. So it's just like the in the Omani context, when student would say help, that means they wanted to change it. It's not like the literal meaning of help that you help the student, to get a better grade perhaps in the next exam, or you help the student to understand what the topic is all about or what the test is all about. But the idea of help here is actually to change the grade, and later on towards the end of the conversation, the teacher understood what the student is actually implying. So to end this one, I would say that the varieties of English can be used as a resource in intercultural communication. Sometimes if you want to clarify something, then the varieties of English that you are using is not actually a hindrance, but it can help in clarifying, ambiguous or unclear forms of communication. And the varieties of English in communication, particularly in intercultural communication, where speakers are given the opportunity to express what they want to communicate. And we should also remember that success in communication can be achieved if speakers develop the language awareness, cultural knowledge, the skills, as well as the attitude. And language and culture are inseparable, and that cultural competence is an integral part of communicative competence in multilingual and multicultural societies. So, thank you and mahalo. We say mahalo here in Hawaii when we say thank you. And that's all. And I would be very happy, to um, answer if you have some clarifications and questions.
Thank you, Dr. Francis. It was so enlightening, very insightful, and probably students would have also learned a lot as I did. Yeah, so it has valuably added to our knowledge, and personally, for me, to read the examples of, although I have lived in Malaysia, but yeah, I haven't sort of keenly analyzed, keenly noticed these differences, although I might have experienced myself, but this was wonderful data to know about and to explore. So again, thanks a lot for sharing this, and I would now request students to probably ask or interact with you about
Sure.
any issue that might crop up right in their mind. So it is over to you. Anybody, please raise your hands and then uh, ask question from Dr. Francis. Who's going to ask?
Sorry, Professor. I just wanted to ask about one example. I
Okay,
didn't
sure.
get I didn't get the meaning. Do you remember the last example about a money student who
Right.
was asking about
Help.
changing? Yeah, help.
Great.
So what did he meant? Like I didn't understand. Sorry for that.
Right. Yeah. This is really complicated, even for the participants whom I was asking at first. I was quite a bit unsure on what the word help is all about. But in the interaction, it shows that the word help is not actually, it does not in the literal meaning, or the the meaning of help, which we normally assist someone, or that's what help means. But in the context of the Omani student, in the example, the word help, it means change. The student is saying, teacher, help my grades. So the teacher was actually thinking at first that to help the students would be to advise the student to perform better in the next test. Then the student was saying, why no help? So the student is keep on insisting, you need to help me. Then later the teacher understand that the word help would actually mean that, teacher, you have to change my grade. That's why towards the end, so in order to end the conversation, the teacher replied, I will see. Yeah, so
Well, thank you. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
so it's it's one way of adjusting. So it shows that towards the end of the interaction, the teacher is actually adjusting to the attitude of the student, what the student would want to do. Yeah. So that's what the word help means in the Omani context. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking that question.
Can I take the floor?
Sure.
Thank you again, Professor, for explaining us and sharing with us your findings and your research. I found it interesting because previously in the last year, we had this kind of discussion among the group when we studied the course. What was the course? I forgot the name of the course. I'm sorry.
The
It was about,
Multilingual Society, maybe.
yeah, Multilingual Society. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and we had a lot of discussion about the named languages, the separate languages, the varieties, and talking about the varieties, we talked about Professor Goodman. And so at this point, we always have discussions and different perspectives. So my question is going to be about the adaptation probably of those people from like Malaysia or Oman, for example, in the context of America, for example, or Britain, because we see that there is a significant difference between how they are using their varieties, like Omani variety or Malaysian variety of English, and how it will be possible for them to communicate with the native speakers, for example. So I'm sure that there will be misunderstandings. And talking about ourselves, so we in Kazakhstan, we learn British and American English. So British English in schools, and by
The media.
yeah, the media is all more about American English. So, but if we in the real life will meet this Omani or like Malaysian representatives talking in their varieties, we will not be able to understand them. So, how these varieties might also be helpful for them in the outer out of the country.
Right.
This, if you
right. That's a very interesting question that you ask. Why, there's different varieties. What if one variety would go to the U.S. and talk to the Americans, or will go to the UK and talk with the British? And like what I've said, it's very important for you to have that cultural awareness, cultural knowledge, and have that skill, then for you to achieve that intercultural competence. So for example, when an Omani speaker would come to the US, for example, then that Omani speaker of English should also understand what the American culture is all about, because it's totally different, when though you are proficient, in fact, even if you are proficient in English, but you're coming from a different culture and you come to the US, it's totally different, because we use here different expressions that are commonly used, by people outside the US. So perhaps some of the students who are studying, English about the US are just basing on what the book is actually, saying, and mostly are formal kind of English and conversation. But when you come here, people are actually in the actual conversation are using this informal Englishes in the interaction. And so therefore, if you're not aware of that, then it would be quite a bit difficult. But for you to overcome those difficulties, in interaction in different varieties of Englishes, the very first thing that you're going to do is to understand what the culture is all about. Then have that cultural awareness, have that cultural knowledge, then have that language and linguistic knowledge as well. But if you are already proficient in English, then you just go to the cultural knowledge, cultural understanding, and the skill, and at the same time be familiar with the attitude in interaction. And that's why, it would take time for you to make an adjustment. Maybe the first encounter would be quite a bit complex and a bit complicated if both speakers are not familiar with each other's culture. That's why I put emphasis that in multilingual societies, it is very important for you to understand the culture of other people, cultural understanding, cultural awareness, developing skills in interaction, and developing that communicative competence would be the most important thing that you will do. Like, for example, when you go to the UK, it would be very difficult to interact with the British if you don't know what their culture is all about. And if you don't have that cultural awareness, like cultural knowledge, because some of the expressions that they use would be very much related to their culture. And I think even in Kazakhstan, for example, in Kazakhstan, you speak different languages, and when you interact with them and you're not familiar, you're not aware of their culture, you have no knowledge of the you have no cultural knowledge of the other ethnic groups, then it would be very difficult for you to interact. Although perhaps you know the language, but we always say that for you to be communicatively competent, you should know when, how, and when and how you're going to use the language. And it boils down to the idea of when it is appropriate, to use the language, because appropriateness would result to understanding. Yeah, but there is no like a one-time solution for that. Like you would say, oh, I'm already proficient in English, then I'm going to travel to America, then I would be able to understand them right away. If you're not aware of the American culture and you come here, it though you're proficient in English, then it would be quite a bit difficult for you to interact with the people, because the kind of expressions that they have are rooted with their culture. Yeah. Any other questions?
I wanted to ask a question.
Sure,
So
sure,
from a
Sinbad.
previous course that we have taken, I have read a paper about like there was a research in a few EMI schools here in Kazakhstan, which had the ICC approach in their language teaching. So they were
Mm.
touching upon the intercultural communicative competence. And the survey results has shown that the challenges that teachers experienced in promoting students ICC, or like one of the challenges was lack of experience and knowledge about how to teach culture through the teaching methods in in English language. So my
Right,
question is like how, because most of us are going to be educators in the future,
right.
whether at the school level or at the university level, how can we raise awareness of students and reduce this lack of experience, like get rid of the lack of knowledge and experience both
Right,
among students and teachers
right.
as being educators?
Yeah, thank you, Sinbad, for that very interesting question. And I think I would say that's a very common problem of um, many learners and many teachers, especially in countries where a lot of multilingual speakers of um, language, and at the same time, these learners are learning, another language, which is English, which is totally different from their culture. And the problem here is that my personal understanding would be most of the teachers are very much dependent on the book. And like, for example, in teaching English, they just make use of their own of the book that they got. For example, that book is authored by an American, or that book is authored a by a British. Then it would be very difficult for the teachers to really integrate culture there, because I presume that perhaps the teachers are not even familiar with the culture that they're actually integrating there. So for me, I think it would be very much important that that's why in my class, I always encourage the students not, you can use the textbook as a framework, but in the actual teaching, don't allow the textbook to dictate to you what to teach. But as a teacher, you have to develop your own. So I always encourage authentic materials, to be used in teaching, especially when you're teaching culture. What, for example, if you want to look at, integrate the American culture, then perhaps you can make use of the movie clips to introduce in the class too, because what you see in the book or what you read sometimes in the book is totally different from what is actually used in the actual use of the language. Like the book, for example, would say, hi, how are, the basic learners would say, hi, how are you? Then I'm fine, thank you. How about you? So there's a story about that, a Chinese who came to the US and studied about um, English. And then when she came to the US, she learned that, the very first thing that you're going to do, if someone would ask you, how are you? Your reply should be, I'm fine, thank you. How about you? So that's the usual, patterns of conversation. Then this Chinese student keeps on calling her mother in China and all, at the same time teaching her mother, some English. And she said to her mother, Mother, here I learned in America that if someone would ask you, how are you? Your response would be, I'm fine, thank you. How about you? Something like that. Then the mother memorized that one. Then every time they talk, they practice English on the phone. And the daughter would say to the mother on the phone, how are you? And the mother would say, I'm fine, thank you. How about you? Then one time the daughter received a message from a relative saying that the mother was really ill and was really sick, and so you have to call your mother right away. Then the daughter called the mother, and the daughter said, "Hi, mother, how are you?" Then the mother, who was really sick and who was really ill, replied, "I'm fine, thank you. How about you?" So it's just like, so the kind of learning, becomes like unreal because we're just following this kind of thing from the text. So I would encourage that it would be good to use authentic materials. If you have your textbook, especially you'll be teaching English, and that's what I always tell my future English teachers here, that when you design, you need to really design your own syllabus, that this is how you're going to teach, but you will be assisted with your textbook, but never be dictated on how you're going to teach through the use of the textbook. Don't just simply, follow everything from the textbook, but it's good for you. It could be used as a framework, but perhaps the materials that you're going to use should be perhaps different. You have to assess, what your students actually need, especially when if you want to integrate culture, because culture is something that is very difficult to integrate if you just base on the textbook. So I would suggest that the use of authentic materials can be very helpful. So one example is through the use of the movie clips, or maybe you can get like some talk shows, from other countries, and this is how you could see, how naturally they use the language and how they use it, and you could see, the culture and analyze it and show that one to the students, and perhaps explore, how the cultural practices, in that particular country, rather than just simply relying on textbooks. When I was in Oman, I was even telling, my colleagues that because they have this kind of practice that when you teach English, you have to follow the book, from cover to cover. Then I said, no, you could not just follow everything what is written on the book because the students don't understand them. They were talking about snow, and the students don't understand what is snow because in their country they don't have the snow. In Southeast Asia, in particular, so when they talk about like food, different food, from different countries, expressions, for example, different expressions also, and which is very complicated when you're going to teach idiomatic expressions are very complex, topics to teach. You could not just say, okay, break a leg would mean like this, that the student might understand it literally, that they have to break the leg, such kind of thing. But you have to show them the actual, example, how it is used in that particular culture. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. That's really interesting. And I think many English teachers face this kind of issues, especially in multilingual and multicultural countries. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Francis. Yes, anybody else who is interested to ask any question relevant to the talk? Hello?
You can ask me also other
Oh,
May I ask
topics
a
that I
question?
can answer. Yes, as
Aslan,
Selsan, yeah.
yes, yes,
I wanted to know, how did you come to topic of your research? For example, every research topic has its like story. For example, my research has my own story background that I have experienced. And what about your, like, how did you come to research this, searching for this topic and exploring it throughout Oman, Malaysia, and other countries? How did you
Um,
come to that?
oh yeah, that's really interesting. The beauty of being an English teacher, you can travel in different countries. I taught when I taught in the Philippines for a number of years. Then I went to Malaysia and I taught for 13 years, and I went to Oman for 3 years to teach. Then here in the U.S. So I went to those. I worked in those different places, and my exposure to the language and the culture, I would say, is sufficient enough. Yeah, and I think that's the benefit, that if you're specializing in English, that you can travel anywhere you want. If you want to teach, in different countries. And that's where I got, those ideas, and being able to interact with different people in Southeast Asia, with the Malaysians, Indonesians, Filipinos, Thais, Cambodians, Vietnamese, Chinese in China. Then I even had, a lot of students before from Mongolia,
mhm.
and I had a number of students in Africa and the Middle East in particular, and I was able to stay also in the Middle East for a few years. Yeah, so that's where I got those, interesting topic.
Mhm. Thank you, Dr. Francis. Now, if students haven't got their question, I've got a question to ask,
Sure.
and probably this is what concerns me a lot. I have frequently come across people, now,
Thank you, Professor.
Thank
um,
you.
right. The question is about this binary, between the native speakers versus the non-native speakers, and the native speakerism ideology, as it is called, I have observed, probably all of us have seen this as well. One of the dominant tendencies both among the native speakers as well as the non-native speakers of English is to look down upon the non-native varieties, mainly because they understand that their spoken language varieties imply less accent or no accent as the natives do, right?
Right.
And even I have also seen that even non-native users of English also tend to underestimate and consider there's the other varieties which are used by the other non-natives as substandard varieties.
Right.
Even I have seen people like making fun of I have seen Arabs making fun of the Indian variety of the English, and then also seen like some people making fun of the Malaysian varieties of the English language. It's not only about native speakers sort of underestimating the non-native varieties, but even non-natives amongst
Yeah.
themselves have got this crisis of thinking or crisis. Yeah. So now in this backdrop, what do you advise us, how we could negotiate this ideology, and probably how to minimize its intensity, right? And
Right.
why is it happening, and how we could neutralize this? Do you think neutralizing this is important, given in the world English's paradigm, and given that English has become a global language? For example, Kazakhstan, which was 20 years before I mean, there was English was a foreign language, and very
Right.
few officials would use. Now it has become a almost a universal language. You could see students. So how to neutralize the effects of this native speakerism and the standard variety?
Right. That's really a very interesting question because last week one of my students here who came from South Africa, although she claims to be a native speaker of English because um, her parents were, one of her parents was from the US and the other one is from
Mhm,
Africa, but she grew up in Africa, and so her accent is more of the African accent, although she's
mhm,
white, but
mhm,
the accent was an African English, and she said that her English wasn't really good yet. And I said, why did you
mhm,
say so? Because of her accent, that's not American. And I
mhm,
said, why are you bothered with having a non-American accent? Then she said, now some of my classmates are actually saying that, my accent
mhm,
is not clear and they cannot be understood.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I started explaining in the class that, when we talk about global Englishes this time, in the perspective of global Englishes and um, the perspective of world Englishes, accent is no longer a factor there.
mhm,
Because what matter this time would be how understandable you are when you speak
mhm,
English. And
mhm.
that's what we call the educated variety of English. So when we
Exactly.
talk about the educated variety of English, this is a kind of English that is spoken by many educated individuals, regardless of your accent. I said, don't play much attention to the accent because different people have different accents. Even I said, even here in the US, we have different accents. When you go to the southern part of the US, they have a very different accent. And if you go to the northern part of the US, they have different accent. Or even within the North American context, people from different states have also different ways of speaking. For example, if you are from New York, they could easily identify, oh, you're a New Yorker
Mhm,
because the way you speak English is like that. Or if you're from California, they'll say, oh, you're from California because that's how you speak, English. So and if you're from America and you go to the UK, they're totally different. So
mhm,
um, the British English is totally different with the American English, and the British English is also different with the accent in with the Australian English is also different with the Canadian or the British English. So I said, and so what is the problem? Why are you worried? And I think because of people's perception that if you follow, like, especially the American English, it's sometimes equated to the intelligence of the person, that the more you speak like an American, then you're good and you're better in English. And if you speak like British, you're good, and if you
mhm,
speak like other varieties, Indian variety of English, for example, they would look at that one as something that's not really acceptable, and that's not really good. I think the issue here is that this is really difficult to really immediately remove from the mindset of the
mhm,
people. And
mhm,
the best thing for us to do is to provide more awareness that English is becoming global, and there are the emergence of different varieties of English, and regardless of what English you speak, for example, you speak Kazakh's English, it doesn't make you less as compared to Americans, as long
mhm,
as you understand each other. If you
mhm,
speak Kazakh's English, it doesn't really matter whether you speak Kazakh's English or British English. The important thing is that you're able to understand, you're able to interact, and you're able to carry out the conversation in an English language. And I think the idea of unequal Englishes still
mhm,
persists, despite the emergence of global Englishes and world Englishes. So perhaps continuous awareness or continuous dissemination of awareness about Englishes would be very helpful. But this will take time
Mhm.
before this kind of ideology, be totally diminished. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the
Mhm.
sad truth, I would say. But
Mhm.
I would just want to say that whatever English you speak, try to not consider the other English speakers as low, the other one is high, or the other one is better, the other one is bad, because accent doesn't really matter. When you talk about intelligence, they're not even correlated. There's no correlation at all. Look at the French speakers. When they speak English, you can easily identify that they're French, because look at the Italian. When they speak English, you can easily identify them as Italian. Look at when the Spanish speakers when they speak. So I think this one is, and that is one of the reasons why I offer global Englishes course in our university, in order to educate also not just the student as well as the my colleagues, that because here I would admit that there is still, like, people sometimes frown when they notice that, oh, you don't sound like American, just like
Mhm.
you're 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 different, such kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I think slowly, as we disseminate this idea or ideology about global Englishes and world Englishes, perhaps this one would
Mhm.
slowly disseminate. But like what I've said earlier, it might take time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. You have quite nicely explained, and I second your viewpoint. And again, this is just to let students know also, right? You know, using English is not only about spoken right form of English, right?
Right.
It is also about overall communicative competence. It is all about your writing skills if you are an academician. Because I myself was thinking exactly this way, as I used to underestimate myself being a non-native speaker coming from a somewhat different background. And then when I started writing, and then when I realized that no, my writing makes sense, and reviewers from across the world
Right.
who might be native speakers, but still they understand my academic writing, and I can get my message across. So why not to sort of feel confident about my writing skills? So we shouldn't confine language use to accent or oral forms only.
Right.
There is a lot of strength that we could draw upon, right, as academic writers. Because I always give my students examples of some prominent scholars in the field, in our field, such as Suresh Kanagaja, who's a Sri Lankan, but he's a
Yeah.
prolific writer, right? Now
Right.
nobody now considers his accent being illegitimate one, because he doesn't imply the
Exactly.
American kind. And even Nancy Hornberger comes from Latin America. We've got so many other scholars who are from other parts of the world, but they have established themselves as seasoned scholars in the field. So
Yeah.
that's how some of the students tend to think or underestimate, their own variety of language, because of the fact that they might not be as accented as the natives would do. So we need to spread an awareness and give them the confidence that
Yeah.
yeah, it's
I
not the
think
reality.
I could say that be proud of your accent, and that would make you more confident, and that would make you who you are, and people would recognize you because of your accent, because of your, like in my case, I'm very proud of, I always tell with my students, I'm proud of my accent, and this is how I talk, this is how I speak, and this is my identity of who I am. So I would advise the students that you have to be proud of the kind of English that you're using, and don't feel less, if you feel that, you you speak a different accent. Be proud of it. Yeah.
And
I
besides
think
this,
Manas is raising his hand.
all right, Manas, please ask your question.
Yes,
Manas?
thank you very much, Mahalo, Professor, for your lecture and for the contribution you are making to our understanding of multilingual world. I have a question regarding in the beginning of the lecture, you have mentioned three types of language speakers. You have
Right.
mentioned the native language speakers, second language, and foreign language speakers. I want to ask about who can we consider a native speaker? Because in the global world, we have like multiple countries who are bilingual. In South Africa, for example, and
Right.
Australian. Can we consider native speakers are only those who are from America and from Britain, or we can consider other people are also bilingual English language speakers are also natives?
Yeah, right. A
Yes.
very good question, Manas. Because that's why there are a lot of debates about the notion of native speakers in the idea that's presented by Kutcher in his three-circled model, saying that the native speakers of English from these countries like America, UK, and Australia, and New Zealand, or Canada, because there are a lot of new generations this time wherein they started English, from a very young age in their families, and that's the first language that they actually acquire. And others acquire only their heritage language, the after acquiring English. And if the student will be, or if a person will be asked, "What's your first language?" Then automatically they would say, "Oh, my first language is English." But you stay in Kazakhstan. And your question would be, will I be considered as a native speaker of English because I live in Kazakhstan? I don't live in the US, but my first language is English. Will I be a native speaker of English? I would say that you are a native speaker of English because that is your first language. When you go back to Kutcher's universal grammar theory, that the first language that you actually acquire, that's how your that's the your grammatical structure um, in your brain would be of the grammar of English, because that is the first language that you acquire. And so therefore that is your mother tongue and you are a native speaker of that language. And if you acquire, your heritage language, subsequently after you acquire English, then your heritage language could be your second language. And so therefore this kind of like context would actually uh, argue with other scholars, perspectives. But my answer would be, regardless of where you are geographically, but English is the first language that you speak, I would say that you are a native speaker of English because that's your first language. So the grammatical structure that you have in your brain is of English grammatical structure, if we're going to look at Kutcher's universal grammar perspective. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor, for clarification.
You're welcome. And we have Idana is raising her hand. Idana, you're raising your hand.
I raised it when I asked my
Okay.
question previously.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes,
So, Professor, can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
My question is like, if for example, so these three countries that you talked about have created their own varieties of English, right?
Right.
So what might happen if every nation or every country will do the same, will have their own variety? So talking about Kazakhstan, we don't have the variety of English, so we learn with British or American. So what will happen if we will have like a Kazakh variety, Russians will have Russian variety, and will it be possible for everyone to adapt to their context or to their culture so that they might understand each other when we have only one English which we can all adapt to without adapt different cultures or contexts?
Right. That's a very interesting question. I think the reason here is that I would straightly say that nobody owns English now. Why? Because English is an international language. If it is an international language, everyone owns it. So that means you speak English, you own it because that is an international language. So everyone is an owner of that. That's why so a lot of scholars say that nobody owns English. The one who the one who speaks the language owns that English. And so therefore, that's why different countries are able to develop their own variety of English because it's an international language. So everyone can just say, like now all of you there, since you speak English, you could say, I own English. This is my English. If you would say that, your English is different from the others, yes, because everyone, nobody owns the language, and no one could say that my English is better than the other because it's an international language, and that's the reason why people are developing their own variety. And I understand that Kazakhstan doesn't have yet the variety of its own because English is still as is used as a foreign language. But as you move on to the next circle as a second language speakers, as it evolves, then eventually English will be used in Kazakhstan in different social functions, in the government, in education, and widely spoken among people. Then eventually you can develop your own variety. It goes through a process, like from the inner circle to the outer circle to the expanding circle, and sometimes the expanding circle will eventually move to the to the outer circle when English becomes a second language. And there, in my global English class, some students were actually asking me, "What if we have already different Englishes? So would it result to miscommunication or misunderstanding?" I said, "No. As long as people are aware of each other's culture, as long as people are knowledgeable of others' culture, then we can still achieve this communicative competence. Englishes might vary and would have, but might have one like international English, and international English, as they say this time, would be considered as educated English. So that means that if you speak an English that is educated, understandable by other people from other cultures, then you speak the international English. Yeah. So I'll go back to, I have to reiterate this one that nobody owns English. You own it.
Right. And
Okay,
absolutely.
Professor, thank you. So I
Thank
guess
you.
after your answers, we've got a lot to think about again. Thank
Yeah. So be proud of your English there. And eventually, perhaps, it's really interesting that eventually, when English becomes really widely spoken in Kazakhstan, you might be able to come up with your own Kazakhstan English variety. And that would be really interesting. That is to give also more confidence to the Kazakhs that, oh, we speak our own English. This is our identity of who we are. And I also studied before I did a paper on using the variety of English as identity marker. And that's why I said earlier, be proud of your English. So it might be a different accent or a different way of, using the language, but that is your identity of who you are, and be proud of it. Yeah.
True, true. And one thing more I'd like to add, you have rightly pointed out that, if we are slightly different, right? In our language use, I mean English language use, it's quite natural to be different because our varieties, develop in a totally different socio-linguistic ecology. There is a huge influence of our local languages, right? So Kazakhstani variety might be deeply influenced by Russian, Kazakh, and other varieties.
Yeah.
So it's quite natural, and you can't be. And some people might try to artificially uh, tilt towards the native variety, and it might be very difficult to to develop an exactly native like variety. As you
Right.
rightly pointed out, we shouldn't try to invest too much on doing that, because that is not required unless you
Right.
are comprehensible and you are understandable to others. So your English is perfectly all right. Yes,
Exactly. They say that there is beauty in diversity, and
absolutely.
there is like unity in diversity. So
Agree.
being
Mhm.
diverse is really interesting.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Yes,
in
yes.
English, yeah, we're diverse,
Mhm.
but we are one. We
We are
speak one
one,
English.
definitely.
It's just
Yeah.
that we are diverse, and it
Mhm.
reflects of who we are. It's our identity, and
Mhm.
don't hide your identity. Be proud of your identity because that's how you are known, by people because of
Mhm.
who you are and the language
Yeah,
that you speak. I'm
absolutely.
always proud of my language. Whatever wherever I go, I always say this is my language. This is how I speak, and I'm proud with the way I use my language. And I own English. I always say that because it's an international language, and no one can dictate me to
Mhm.
to follow other people's English. Otherwise, I'm not true to myself.
Mhm. Absolutely. And look at, a live example of this is that we three, I mean, students are students, you and I, we come from different backgrounds, but we
Right.
completely understand each other's
Exactly.
perspective. And we accommodate the slightest differences that are there in the way we pronounce or we accent words. That is
Right.
perfectly natural, I guess. Yeah. So
Yeah.
has
Um,
anybody got any question? Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
I mean,
Amina.
thank you so much for the presentation. Well, while you were talking about identity, I would love to, like, I also had some thoughts about identity formation
right.
as my theoretical framework of my research paper is based on the Zoltan Dornay's, if you know this scholar, Zoltan Dornay's framework of identity formation and future self and the
Right.
present self and the perfect self and etc. Well, and as you talked about the graduate students' employability and the role of English in this aspect, I would love to talk, like, I would love to ask this. It's not like a question, but it's kind of a clarification
Yeah.
whether, like, English has a huge role in the identity formation and identity formation as a future specialist, because, like, we have different social cultural backgrounds, right? And employability and being a specialist is also is kind of a it kind of reflects our own identity. So in this case, role of English in the identity formation in the social cultural perspective. If you have
Y-
some thoughts.
Yeah, I think I would say that English would also play an important role in the identity formation of in the social-cultural context. It depends also. I think I would say it would vary depending on which particular culture you're talking on how they regard, English, for example, in some countries, English is considered to be the language of the elite. And I think I've read that one with Dr. Manon's work, in his research about that the English language is used as a language of the elite, and that one would also affect the identity formation of the speaker of the language. That, oh, if I would speak, English, then I would be considered as an elite kind of person. So it affects the way you look at yourself and the way you construct your identity. So perhaps changing you from one identity to the other depending on the intention of the speaker. Perhaps they would, for them to project a kind of elite kind of identity, then they have to shift to English. And others also look at that one, that English is associated with intelligence, and people, when they would like to showcase their intelligence, perhaps they're going to use English, instead of using the other languages. So I would say that English would or has a role, in the construction of identity, depending on how that particular society or that particular community value, English. And
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
focusing on elite university, and yeah, your comments were really helpful in this case. I'm going to read more about the construction of perceptions towards English in elitarian and
yeah,
like more kind of elitary universities where English is perceived as a sign of intelligence.
yeah. And others also using that one as a sign of high social status in the society. And the better English, and not only that, even accent is also another thing that if you sound like I've read some studies before that in one particular country, when your accent would sound like an American or British, they would look at you very highly rather than those who can
Oh,
speak English, but different accent, they don't really look at that one as highly as those who can. These are the unequal, the product of unequal Englishes, and uh you know lesser knowledge about the value of global Englishes and world Englishes. And so as educators, I think it's very important for us to disseminate, especially to our colleagues and to our learners, that like what I said earlier, that regardless of what kind of English that you speak, as long as you can be understood and you're clear, then everyone is
what I
equal.
can find those articles, I'm really interested in the in the formation of perception and identity formation.
Yeah, I'll try to track that one, and perhaps I can give you a copy if I find it. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Francis. I guess usually our classes of I mean online interaction is for 2 hours, so I think we have reached the time, and I'm
Yeah.
afraid
Okay.
because your commitment was also for 2 hours. So I'm extremely, if there is no question from students, so I would like to sort of wind up this session because you might be having some other engagement. So let me again, on behalf of the
My other
class.
engagement is to sleep.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, it's getting too late. I'm afraid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's 12
yeah,
midnight here now.
y-
Okay.
absolutely. And it's afternoon here, so
Yeah.
and I'll be taking my lunch
Yeah.
afterwards after this class.
Okay.
So see the difference. Dr. Francis, thank you very much. I have no words to express, the gratitude, for your time, for sharing this information. Honestly, I've really enjoyed your session after a long time, and I found this very productive and very enlightening. So thank you so much.
Thank you also for the opportunity. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Professor, so much.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
You.
Professor.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you
Thank
very
Bye.
you so
much.
much.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.